Right now, I do want to take you out to this live look that we do have over the White House at this hour as we get to the latest. Later today, President Trump is going to address the heads of several big businesses at an investment summit in Washington, D.C., hosted alongside officials there from Saudi Arabia. Trump's remarks are set for noon Eastern time, with the heads of Salesforce, Pfizer, and Chevron in attendance, along with others, including Saudi Arabia's national oil and natural gas company. This all comes just a day after the Saudi Crown Prince arrived at the White House to meet with President Trump for his first trip to Washington in 7 years. The Crown Prince announcing about $1 trillion in investments in the U.S., surprising President Trump with that announcement. Take a quick listen.
And I want to thank you because you've agreed to invest $600 billion into the United States. And because he's my friend, he might make it $1 trillion, but I'm going to have to work on him. But it's 600. We can count on 600 billion, but that number could go up a little bit higher. Yes, sir. I don't know. We'll see. But we appreciate it very much. So Saudi is going to be investing at least $600 billion, and that means investments in plants, in companies, money on Wall Street, and what it really means for everybody that really counts is jobs, a lot of jobs.
Today and tomorrow we're going to announce that we are going to increase that $600 billion to almost $1 trillion of investment, real investment and real opportunity by details in many areas. And the agreement that we are signing today in many areas in technology, in AI, in rare earth materials, magnet, etc., that will create a lot of investment opportunities.
So you are doing that now. You're saying to me now that the 600 billion will be 1 trillion.
Definitely, because what we are signing, it will facilitate that, and
I like that very much. Go ahead.
All right, so those were some of the comments there made by President Trump and the Saudi Crown Prince. But the question is, exactly what does all this mean and what is the significance? I do want to bring in Jonathan Schanzer. You can see him right here, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies Executive Director. Jonathan, thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here with us.
My pleasure.
All right, so first off, the big question I do want to ask you as we talk about the situation from yesterday and that meeting between President Trump and the Saudi Crown Prince, explain to me kind of the relationship there between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia and maybe how that's changed over the past several years and even decades.
Sure. I mean, look, the low point of this relationship undeniably was after the September 11th attacks back in 2001. The Saudis had a number of Saudi nationals that took part in that terrorist operation that killed, more than 3,000 Americans. A lot of research was done into Saudi Arabia in the subsequent years, looking at the ways that they had fomented extremism around the Middle East and also around the world. I think a moment of change came in 2003. There were attacks inside the Saudi kingdom. That was and that was carried out by al-Qaeda. That was the moment that I think the Saudis realized that this entire thing was just not worth it. It was creating backlash abroad. It was creating backlash at home. And so you started to see some real changes inside the Saudi kingdom. But I think really the big change came with the arrival of MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince you just saw there at the White House. This is an individual who is deeply flawed. Let's just put it very clearly. We are fairly certain at this point that he had, foreknowledge of the killing of Jamal Khashoggi back in 2018. This is the Saudi-born journalist who was working for the Washington Post at the time. We know that the Crown Prince was involved, or at least aware on some level. But what's interesting is at the same time, this Saudi prince has just taken the country of Saudi Arabia on his back, and he's dragged them into the 21st century. And I think that is what I think we're all watching right now. This is a man who wants to transform his economy. He wants a closer relationship with the United States. He has brought, advanced rights to women in his country. He's trying to modernize the country. He's trying to wean it off of oil. There's a lot of good things happening in Saudi Arabia, despite some of the problems that we've had in the past. But this, to me, feels like a high watermark in U.S.-Saudi relations, this meeting that just took place at the Oval yesterday.
And I want to talk about Khashoggi. You just mentioned that, the Washington Post reporter. Obviously, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding that. It's been discussed time and time again. And really quick, I do want to play a soundbite here from President Trump when he was asked about all of this. Take a listen.
As far as this gentleman is concerned, he's done a phenomenal job. You're mentioning somebody that was extremely controversial. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen. But he knew nothing about it. And we can.
All right. What do you make there of those comments from President Trump?
Look, they conflict with what we heard from our own intelligence agencies here in the United States, where there was an assessment made that MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, had some foreknowledge. It doesn't necessarily mean that he ordered it, although some people believe that he was, in fact, the man who pulled the trigger, so to speak, on the operation that killed Khashoggi at that murder that took place in Turkey, at the Saudi consulate in Turkey. At the end of the day, I think we have to move past this. It doesn't mean that we have to ignore what happened, but I think we have to move past it. In other words, this man is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. When his father, who is ill, when he passes away, he is going to become the king of Saudi Arabia. We're going to have to work with him. You can't choose other countries' leaders. And I think that is sort of where I would shake out on this. I don't know if I would go so far as to exonerate MBS for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. That's what the president has done here, and that's, I think, what's generating controversy. He basically is just saying, hey, look, I'm not even sure that this happened, and even if it did, people didn't like the guy. Well, that's not really, I think, setting the record straight, so to speak. I think that was a bit of a generous description of the Crown Prince, but again, I think the end result is the same, that the United States is going to have to work with him. He's investing huge amounts of dollars in the U.S. economy, and he's bringing the country along on a better path. I think those things are absolutely true. And it's also very likely true that he knew about the plans to murder Khashoggi, or that he, in fact, ordered them. We have deeply flawed people that rule countries around the world, and I think we just need to acknowledge that and move on.
And Jonathan, I did want to ask you here, as we continue to cover all of this, my question for you, we have this investment summit that is expected to take place here sometime around noon Eastern time. That's what we're going to hear from President Trump. What exactly are we expecting to potentially hear, and what should we be watching for overall?
Well, look, you heard about the 600 trillion or 600 billion rather, or as much as $1 trillion in terms of Saudi investments in the United States. I think the question now becomes, do we learn about additional deals, things that attract the investment of the Saudi prince or of Saudi companies, where the Saudis tether themselves even more to the U.S. economy? A lot of that was contingent upon the United States offering major non-NATO ally status to the Saudis, essentially offering security guarantees to the Saudi state. They saw what the Qataris got a couple of months back, and they want the same. And so they've asked for it, and it looks like they're getting it. So now that they're getting that, the question is, how much more do they want to reward the United States, tether themselves to the United States? I can see more money pouring in. The Saudis, again, are looking to transform their economy. They're looking to wean themselves off of oil. They want to be a major business hub. They want to be a major tourist hub. They want to be a country that functions alongside Western countries around the world in the 21st century. That's what the Crown Prince is trying to do here. He can be impulsive. And so he may just say, all right, we're going to spend more money right here, right now. That's the kind of thing that I'm watching for right now in really what is kind of a very freewheeling environment as the senior Saudi delegation descends upon Washington.
Is there any impact, any significance here when you do talk about the situation that's been unfolding now for years over in Gaza, Israel, Hamas, all of that? Does the relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia factor in any way, or I should say, does the war factor into that relationship in any way?
Oh, look, this looms large over everything. You know, the Crown Prince and Donald Trump were speaking about normalization yesterday. Donald Trump is trying to push the Saudis to come over to the side of normalization with Israel. You got to remember that at the end of the first Donald Trump term, the Saudis were on the 5-yard line, maybe even the 1-yard line as it relates to normalization. They were very close to normalizing with Israel. Donald Trump lost the election, and then relations between the Biden administration and MBS, the Crown Prince, they really began to unravel. Now what you have is the return of Donald Trump, obviously, some 10 months ago to the White House. This has allowed the Saudi-U.S. relationship to reset in some ways. They have a very close relationship, and Trump is still thinking and pushing for normalization. I think the Saudis want to do this. But I think they're talking right now about one thing in particular, but I would actually point to two. They're saying first that they need a pathway to a Palestinian state. And that's not a surprise. This has been, I think, a consistent message from the Saudis. But pathway is not a guarantee. What they're basically saying is show the Palestinians that there is a way forward, offer them some hope, and we will sign on to the Abraham Accords. The Israelis now have some choices to make about what that means, what kinds of signs they want to convey to the Palestinians and to the broader Arab world. The other part of this that I think is important to understand is MBS cannot make an agreement with Israel so long as the war in Gaza is still raging, so long as Saudis see these horrific images of Gaza on their TV screens. And they may be exaggerated, and certainly they are by television stations like Al Jazeera, which are trying to radicalize the Arab world. That doesn't matter who's behind it, why it's happening. It's going to be very difficult for the Saudi prince to go ahead with a normalization deal so long as the war continues. So we want to see the war wind down. This is exactly what Donald Trump is trying to do. We just saw a UN Security Council resolution enshrine his 20-point plan for the future of Gaza. That just happened 2 nights ago. This has put us all on a path where you could begin to see the end of the war, and then the resumption of these serious talks about normalization, just as the Saudi prince tethers himself further to the American economy. You can see how all this lines up, but so much of this right now depends on Hamas's willingness to hand over those last 3 slain hostages that they've been holding inside Gaza and to dismantle their military apparatus. These are the 2 things that I'm watching right now, and so much right now hangs in the balance with Hamas's decisions on these 2 fronts.
And as we continue to follow this here, we talked about what to expect from the investment summit itself, what we're going to be watching for. But as far as the U.S.-Saudi Arabian relationship there, what do we need to be watching for in the coming months and even years?
Look, I think, we need to see Saudi stay on the path that it's on, this path of reform. And again, imperfect as this crown prince has been, he is on the path of reform. It's been unbelievable change. In the times that I've visited Saudi Arabia over the last 10 years, I have seen remarkable transformations of this country, all very, very positive. That needs to happen, and that can only happen, in my view, with Mohammed bin Salman still at the helm. When his father passes and he's old and he's ill, it's happening at some point soon. We need to see him take the role of king and then truly begin to transform his country, I think, at an even faster clip. I'm watching for that. I am also watching with some trepidation. The Saudis have talked about wanting the ability to enrich uranium on their own soil. They want their own nuclear program. That's the one thing that we cannot abide by. You do that, and that's when all the other countries around the region say, we want what the Saudis got. And then what you have is what we call the nuclear cascade, where every bad actor in the Middle East, and there are plenty of bad actors in the Middle East, they all aspire to that same thing and maybe even start to do so illegally. So this is the thing that I would just say we need to keep a lid on. We need to keep a close control on what we sell the Saudis as it relates to civilian nuclear technology, and that's part of the deals that they want to sign. That's fine, but we need to keep a lid on that. We need to keep a close eye on what the other countries in the region seek to do.
All right. Jonathan Schanzer, thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to join us. I know you got to go, but anything else you want to add here before I let you go?
Look, the only thing that I would just add right now is that the Middle East is in flux. There are a lot of bad actors that are trying to influence the Middle East. You've got obviously the Iranians and the various terror proxies that they've been funding and arming, and they may try to do it again with another round against Israel. And that obviously is something that the Israelis are watching very closely. You have also a couple of other actors that are nominally identified as American allies. Here I'm talking about the countries of Qatar and Turkey. Neither one of these are positive actors. What I look for right now are the pragmatic Arab states that really want to see calm and peace and prosperity in the Middle East. And here I think the Saudis have an incredibly important role. I think, again, despite all the flaws of this leader, it's important that he's here in Washington. It's important that they roll out the red carpet for him at the White House. And it's important that we ink these deals and solidify this relationship. Again, no one's saying this guy's an angel, but he is far better than most of the alternatives, if not all of them, in the Middle East. I look at Saudi and maybe the United Arab Emirates as the two top countries that we should be working with in a very flawed Middle East alliance environment.
All right. Jonathan Schanzer, Executive Director there at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. We definitely appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And, of course, we did talk there about Khashoggi, and we're talking about the Washington Post reporter. There's been a lot of controversy surrounding this. We played you those comments from President Trump here live as he made them yesterday, but also played you that portion as we were talking to Jonathan Schanzer. Now we are actually getting some brief remarks coming in from the Associated Press and Sky News. All of this from the widow of Khashoggi. Take a listen.
Same time, I was disappointed with the describe of my husband being unconversible man and unlikely man. And I would like to answer in this to President Trump. President Trump, you do know my husband very well, and I'm willing to meet with you and share with you everything about my husband. My husband was a very transparent man. He was a great man and a professional, and he was a brave man as well. Even if someone doesn't like him, which is sometimes happened, doesn't justify the action of kidnapping him, torture him, killing him, and dismantle his body. There is nothing to justify the crime happened. No explanation for it. I'm not satisfied, and I really wish I have the opportunity to meet with the Crown Prince. First, to introduce the real Jamal to him, because I believe strongly he's been misinformed about Jamal. And the Crown Prince, he take accountability in his 60 Minutes interview in 2019, but nothing happened after that. No next step happened after that to show the world really there is a sincere regret and apology and rectifying of this. In sense, there is no transparent trial happened.
And again, those were just some of the comments that we did receive from the Associated Press and Sky News as they spoke exclusively with the widow. Now, we're also getting some reaction via Reuters here, and you can see her photo there on the side of your screen. It says Jamal Khashoggi's wife said that she felt dismayed by Trump's remarks that the Saudi crown prince knew nothing about the 2018 killing of the journalist by Saudi agents, for which bin Salman has been strongly criticized by human rights groups. Of course, as we get more of this reaction from AP and Sky News, we'll play it for you here on Live Now from Fox. Right now, we do have to sneak in a quick 2-minute commercial break, but so much more live coverage coming up in just a few. Stay with us here on Live.